Meena Kothandaraman, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on
Oh,
your
of
show.
course. I'm honored for a few reasons. When we first connected, I said to you, I've known of your work for a good 2+ decades, but we had never met in person. But what I'm excited about today, we've had a couple of conversations. I'm very excited for this one. You are a pioneer and luminary. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit here, but why I've been following you for so long. We spoke a little bit about the state of the UX research space. And there's some issues right now in terms of the quality of some of the work and some of the output. And I've been such a fan of your work because you've been doing work in the research space, UX space for 2 decades plus, and you're doing work that really has meaning. It's creative, it's innovative. You're sharing with other researchers how they can move beyond how they've been thinking about their practices today. So I would like to delve into that today. There's no one else that I'd recommend they listen to first in terms of upskilling.
Wow, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if I'm worthy of all those accolades, but thanks so much.
And I mentioned I could go on and on, Meena, but I've been inviting on, the way I describe it is powerhouse women in tech. And I like to allow the folks I bring on to share their story in their own words. If you were to tell your story in a couple of minutes, how do you tell that story? The challenge is in a couple of minutes, but can you tell us about your story?
Absolutely. That's a challenge. My undergraduate actually was in more computer science and really like more of the pure computer science discussion. And in Ottawa, Canada, which is where I grew up and I went to school at the University of Ottawa, they did actually start a co-op program, which was one of the first co-op programs in Canada as well. And I had the wonderful opportunity of being placed at a company where there was one woman who actually was doing really early human factors work, really getting into the understanding of design and understanding it from the human perspective and from the human story. And I really got interested in it. I was really well supported. I ended up joining that company full time. So it really propelled me into wanting to do a master's degree in human factors or something related to that. And basically, I did look around Canada. Canada did not have advanced programs for it. So I looked toward the United States, and I was very fortunate because I went to Syracuse University. So at SU, I did end up getting accepted into graduate school, and I was given instruction by some people from Xerox PARC, the Palo Alto Research Center, which of course at the time was just one of the leading pioneers. There was Kodak, there was Xerox. I know these are all very dated names now, but they definitely created so much foundation for what we are doing today. And the long story short is I did end up having really a wonderful experience at SU. And then I started to really want to use my knowledge in an actual work environment. My sibling at the time was in Boston, so I went from Syracuse to Boston, and I joined a company called Cambridge Technology Partners. I then moved from there to Human Factors International. I got to really travel the world. And I think if there was something I had to pick on with the companies, I really got to see that culture does play a really important part in how we consume products and services and experiences. I myself come from a really rich cultural background with both of my parents embedding me in our Indian heritage. And by going around the world, I got a chance to actually see the value of that. And then it came a point in my life where I really came to an impasse where I wasn't sure, like, how do I work and how do I think about having a family? So I actually took a pause and talked to my husband about it. And he was incredibly supportive. And what ended up happening was I actually went independent. And I was so grateful to be able to, it was 25 years ago. So now 25 years I've been an independent. But what I ended up doing was just work that was so nurturing and so happy because I actually had people who truly understood what it meant to have work-life balance. They appreciated the fact that I did have stark working hours. My colleague now, Zarla, always reminds me that I used to say at 3 p.m. I would turn into a turkey. And that's literally what I would do is I would become mom to my 2 kids. In 2010, I got asked by a dear friend at Motivate Design to help build her research practice. And I did that and I really enjoyed it. I was a consulting professional still, But then I think I just really was happy not having to travel quite as much. And my kids were at that age where it's just hard to leave them and go away constantly. So I just started to work in Boston. And at the time, my lovely colleague, Zarla, who I brought into Motivate Design, was also in Boston. And we just decided to, hey, why don't we just start doing projects together and actually have some fun with this? And we just hit our 10th year.
Congratulations.
It's so fun. We started in 2015, obviously 10 years now, 2025. But our focus was really to emphasize, and we formed our practice, which is called Twig Fish Research Practice. It's what we call a micro agency in Boston. And it basically brought us to the moment where we really started to focus on what we call the 3 Ps: the power, the positioning, and the practice of qualitative research.
There's so much I'd like to unpack about your story, so thank you. You mentioned something that I found really interesting, that inflection point where you were traveling the world, you were rocking it, and you knew you wanted to be a parent, and you decided to make the choice to go independent. Yeah. It wasn't 25 years ago for me. It was 10 years ago where I decided to become a mom. That's when I made the shift to going independent. Can you speak a little bit to, you are a powerhouse and you are rocking it, and you chose to step back for a little bit. Was there a lot of decision making when you were speaking to your husband? Did you have fear about doing that? And how do you feel like it's played out for your career?
That's a really great question. I don't see myself as a powerhouse, so you're really kind in saying
I do.
Thank you. But it's interesting when you are in the moment of making these big decisions. I actually gave a talk on this. I did it for UXP in Boston, I want to say just before having kids or just on the onset of having kids. And I spoke about the fact that you make a choice. And to me, it's a very definitive choice. In a moment, you decide, is work more important or is family more important? Because in any given moment, it's so hard. Like one could say, well, you can have it all. But in any given moment, when you have to make a decision, sometimes you really do need to know what takes precedent. And it's helpful when you say, I'm not going to question what's going on. It will be X, whatever you decide. I respect people who say it will be work, because I have somebody who's very capable of taking care of my children. I also respect people who say it will be my family. And really, it can go both ways. I will say that I was nervous because as an independent practitioner, you start the cycle of getting clients and it's very hard to suddenly stop, right? So that was definitely a concern for me. I had a wonderful mentor who is still just as dear to me like a father, literally, a gentleman named Hal Miller Jacobs at HFI. And he was instrumental, I think, in assuaging any of my fears that I had, because he was so good. He was so supportive. And he said, you know what? You will find work and I will help you find the work. Even after I left HFI, he was like, doesn't matter. I can always bring you in as a contractor. We'll keep your work going and trickling. Andre Deshield says, you find the people who light up when your eyes light up when you walk into a room. There's so much truth to that. So I found the people who supported me. When I was at Scient, I was under the care of our chief experience officer. Her name was Nancy Dickinson. She too was unbelievably supportive in terms of helping me make these decisions, to the point where they just gave me that confidence. I was also really blessed because my husband never questioned anything. And if anything, he's really told me, he's like, you keep on tapping your toe into the water, just jump in, jump in and immerse yourself. You won't know otherwise.
Yeah.
So yeah, consternation. But if I answer the latter part of your question, I wouldn't change a thing. I have literally had the perfect work-life balance. I kid you not. I am so grateful because I know that is a gift, because I also had a spouse who did help me through those moments, but I would not change a thing.
Yeah, that leads into, well, first, I wanted to thank you, Meena. I wanted to touch on something you said and ask you about it. I started the Lift Up podcast. I've been doing this for about a year, and I've been asking women in my network, primarily in the product UX industry, who are the powerhouse, and I describe it as powerhouse women I should speak to. And I didn't share this with you. One of our mutual connections, Malini Rao, put us in touch, but 3 other women said your name and recommended you to me. And you mentioned what really speaks to me. So 4 women in our network brought you up, and you don't consider yourself, you said, thank you very much, I don't consider myself a powerhouse. What does powerhouse mean to you? And I just wanted you to know others consider you a powerhouse.
Yeah, it's you're making me think, which I really do appreciate. I think I have seen other people as being powerhouses, people who have a voice and are really heard a lot by different people. I think also because a lot of my career has been spent, and I've mentioned this to you, as a lone woman of color. So I find that there have been moments where I have said things and other people have then said it a fraction of a moment later. And what I said didn't resonate, but what they said did. So perhaps I have not seen myself in that leadership position. I also have given a talk on leadership, and the way I see leadership, I think, is a little different. And I used animals as an analogy, but you can have lions, you can have elephants. They all lead their herds and their prides and their packs very differently. I think I return to my roots. I'm a Canada geese, because when geese fly, there's always a leader, but then the leader might get tired. So they just step back, and somebody else might have ability. They might have knowledge in a given moment where I think that they take the lead. I'm so grateful. I have been surrounded by people who are so capable. And even though they might be short on one side, they will be brilliantly taller on the other. I think it's that variety of lived experience. It's that variety of background. Just because you don't have a ton of experience, I always feel sad when people are like, oh, I'm so new, you know so much. No, actually, when you're new, you have a superpower that none of us have. You have new eyes. You have fresh eyes on something. And your way of describing something might actually be beautifully different and yet ridiculously simple compared to the way I present it to somebody. So I think I teach at Bentley University. I've been teaching for 25 years as well. And I love that I hear that from my students. Many of them say, oh my God, I'm not as seasoned, or I don't have as much experience. I will tell you, my experience has shaped who I am, but I still think what they bring to the table is invaluable.
One thing that came up, your extensive background as you were telling your story. I've been doing work with women in tech, primarily UXers and product managers, mid-career, senior career, trying to figure out, many of them, what's next in their career, whether they stay in-house, whether they go out on their own, whether they do something completely different. And when I was hearing your story, your extensive story and wealth of experience, it aligns with something that's been coming up with the women I speak to, that there's only one you. And your background has been so extensive. You've traveled to the world. As you mentioned, you've been a lone woman of color in circumstances. And what I've been telling these women is, thinking through your story and what makes you you, only you can have the career that happens, because it's about you and your experiences and your upbringing and everything you learned along the way. And I'm hearing that from you, like where you've landed. You're seasoned, but you've had your own story, and then you described your students. They're them, and they'll figure it out.
I think so. And I failed to say, first of all, a huge thank you to Malini for putting us back in touch. Because honestly, I agree with you. We should have met a long time ago in person. I don't know how that happened. Thanks to the kind women who recommended my name. I think that each one of us brings something rich to the table. When I look at my own past, my parents came from India. They lived in the United States briefly, and then they moved to Canada. There were 2 types of parents, really. The kind of parents who wanted to hold on to their traditions and their cultures, and others who actually felt like they had to shed them in order to fit in. My parents were the former, where they held on very tightly. Sometimes my husband is actually from India, and sometimes I actually know more than him, which is a little scary, about certain customs and traditions. And he laughs. He's like, what? Like, why do you know this so well? But I think in some ways that's shaped, because I grew up in a household where you were just told something and you just don't really disagree with it. You do whatever you're told. And I was the person who always wanted to know the why. I'm like, okay, why exactly is this happening? So sometimes you might lament about situations being a certain way, but actually in some weird way, they end up shaping how you look at things. And I think it did exactly that, is it really started to ask and challenge my why. And it definitely helped me navigate this concept of connecting with people. There's nothing more joyous for me than to talk to people about something as mundane as how they actually consume energy from their utility or how they actually throw waste into the trash. When you hear that people actually connected back to something that is not just superficial, it's something that's deep, it's something that's within them, and it's something that really resonates with them. It might be deep down, and I always feel as a researcher, your job is to get people to reflect on themselves more than just answering your questions, because when they go deep, that's when the secret sauce comes together and everything flies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Yes, it has shaped me. It has helped me navigate some difficult situations. It has definitely made it very unique for me, but in a way that I always tell not only my students in class, but even generally people who will reach out and be like, hey, I get 30 minutes of your time to talk to you. Don't discount your background. I've had people tell me I came from a broken family and I struggled. My mom was a single mother and I just can't look at my past because it's so difficult. I'm actually the opposite. Look at your past. You have a superpower. You have something that I don't have. You've experienced something that I can only marginally empathize about because I truly don't know the struggles of what you or your mother went through. So when you see this and you actually get people to really leverage and really, I don't want to sound cliche, but connect with themselves, I think that makes a huge difference.
It's absolutely true, Meena. And I wanted to share with you going into this conversation because I wish I had been at dozens of conferences with you over the years. I was going back to some of your presentations. And also, even in this conversation, you've exemplified something that's been bubbling up where you live and breathe and focus on the importance of connection and community. I watched several of your keynote presentations, and the first thing you do is you're not like, hey, I'm Meena, let's jump into the talk. You commend the people you've been there working with. You commend the people, you highlight the people who put together the events. You have spoken, and I've seen you speak to the audience and say, let's take a breath.
Yeah.
Let's take a minute to think about this presentation and this panel. And you took a breath because you're thinking about the people you're in the room with. In this conversation already, you've mentioned many people who have had an influence and impact on you. We will talk about research, I promise, but the way you're approaching your work and life and connecting with people just shines through in these moments.
I'm so lucky. I have worked with the nicest people, not only colleagues, but relationships that we have built. And I haven't even mentioned my current colleague who has been my colleague for 10 years, but Zarla has been such a source of inspiration to me. She has been such an incredible source of inspiration. It's one of those moments where you think, oh, she has less experience than you. I kid you not, nobody does analysis as well as she does. Qualitative analysis is hard work. You know that. You understand that. I have just been really fortunate to work around people who are willing to offer their time and their counsel and their encouragement and sometimes just random kindness. And I think that to me is really precious. I think the world right now needs a little bit more of that. I believe it's either Danish or Dutch. And it's called the Human Library Organization. And what it is they have people. And you go and you check out a person as you would a book in a library. And you simply talk to them to learn about something that you are curious to learn about. The example that I typically give is, what does it feel like as a woman to wear a hijab? What does that actually mean to you? I have what I think is unfair Maybe I think it's unfair. Maybe you're forced to wear this, but what if you actually take pride in wearing it? Like, I want to hear your side of the story. I think that joy is very hard to replicate.
Meena, there's something I am going to ask you what you'd like researchers specifically. We'll have a lot of UXers, product folks, but UX researchers, I do want to delve into our conversation, the state of the research industry and your take and the work you're doing. I'm also hoping, I mentioned to you when I heard your story, you're doing some inspiring, innovative work. If my one hope from this conversation, we're going to be delving into the work you're doing in the education system and how you're bringing only you, I could see, given telling your story, could do this in this one way. But a little teaser, I'm hoping UX researchers who are feeling scared right now with the state of the industry will hear your story and hear about the inspiring work you're doing to do good in the world. So to start, can I ask you, I'd love to talk about the work you're doing within the education system.
Sure.
Can you give your assessment of the state of the UX research industry and what you're seeing these days? And then we'll go from there.
Sure thing. That's a really good question. And sometimes I feel like I have to caution myself because I want to make sure I'm being super fair to the people who are going through this in the moment. But there's a few things that I think I'm noticing. First of all, on the positive side, because I always want to start positive, is that there is an eagerness for people to really want to do good. People want to do good. People want to be a contributor. Nobody wants to come in and be like, I don't want to do anything in my job and I just want to go home and feel like I've done nothing. So I truly believe their heart is in the right place. We feel like we can expedite that. If I had asked myself as an undergraduate going through co-op and taking one course and then coming out and thinking, I should be able to do this, I can tell you, I didn't start with this much confidence. I did not. And that's not a bad thing. Of course, the more circumstances and situations you're exposed to, and that the players are different, then you see different things, you observe different things, you turn on these skills. And I feel like people try to super speed that. There's a bit of patience that has to be had. I especially see this when I see some of the students in my class, like they feel very let down when they finish the class and they're like, I don't know if I could do this again.
What are you expecting?
First of all, they put so much pressure on themselves. I think it's very unfair. It's very unfair. Now, I know you and I have had this conversation. I don't think the education system is encouraging them. So our education system, especially in the United States, let's just talk about the United States, really focuses on advancement of the self, and you are not given time to really reflect. You're not given time to be curious. There is a goal in mind. The moment you hit middle school, you're already thinking about what you have to plan for high school. Because then once you're in high school, you have to plan what you're going to do in college. When I know my kids went through a very competitive, wonderful, yet very competitive. And I could see that. And I'm like, as wonderful as it is to be nurtured and encouraged by people around you, because peer pressure can be a good or bad thing, as we both know. But when you forget the importance of taking a step back, or what does it really mean to take a break? Like, even how many of our peers, both of us included, take a vacation, but they end up responding to emails or on their vacation?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you really disconnecting? I leverage BJ Fogg and his tiny habits discussion here because I think that's what we have to get back to. We need to start beginning those tiny habits again. We need to resurrect that. So when I look at the researchers, specifically the researchers, I really want them to be a little bit more patient, and I want them to still advocate for themselves, still know the process, be able to speak the language, but never feel as if they should be put into a corner. Because not one developer that I know, not one product manager that I know, not one marketing specialist that I know, not one engineer that I know ever came hot off the press knowing everything.
Yep.
And I have been around the block. So why are we singularly putting so much pressure not only on researchers, but honestly, the UX profession in general?
Yep.
And I think that is where I want people to, I know this sounds a little harsh, but have a bit more of a backbone. Don't allow somebody to corner you. Don't allow that to happen. And what has happened is we slowly enabled it to happen, and we dug our hole a little deeper. So much so that now people starting almost feel like they're in this very tiny abyss that they are looking on both sides and they're cornered.
Yeah. Meena, I was recently, this is bringing to mind to me, I was talking with Ala Weinberg, who has been in the UX industry for 20 years. And like you, she was sharing for UXers. She described it as many UXers are facing collective trauma, where all of the conversations are focusing on execution and tactics. Like their nervous system is out of whack because the discussions haven't been about what is the value we're offering to humans and people anymore. It's how do we show the value to the C-level? How do we translate what we're doing to the numbers? And she's describing it as UXers aren't taking the breath and aren't thinking about what is our real value in the industry. There's panic and there's trauma. I'm curious what your reaction is to that.
Absolutely. When you get a little stifled, I think it's okay if it happens once, but when there's a pattern of stifling, it starts to embed and embark on that journey of trauma. So she's probably, and her lived reality might be slightly different from mine, right? Where I had people, I want to say, protecting me from a lot of that. So I experienced it, but every time I felt like I was going into the abyss, I had somebody trying to yank me out. So I've been really blessed with the people that have been around me. I just honestly cannot give them enough credit. But I feel exactly what she's saying is very accurate. So if people have to, and I think of something that my colleague Zarla has said, which again, she's just one of the more articulate people that I know, and I'm not quite as articulate as her, but I will say that she said something one day that really resonated, which is researchers, our job is not simply to respond to the ask of a question. If you can ask a question, you could be a researcher. She's like, that's really wrong. That's like saying to a designer, you can draw. You could be a designer. Like, what about all the other skill set that's involved with it? And what about all the other work? If you think about the job of a researcher, it is to actually give people space to reflect on their knowledge, to reflect on the confidence in their knowledge, to reflect on the knowledge sources that really nurture their knowledge, what those knowledge sources are and what confidence we have in those knowledge sources. It keeps on unpacking a new layer to investigate. If we simply reduce research to the act of answering a question, we're missing the point.
Yeah, Meena, I have not met Zarla, but you can please pass along to her. I'm a big fan of hers as well, because when I was doing my research and looking into the work you've created with the incredible framework, if people want to learn the entire process, they can go to you and Zarla. But what I wanted to share with you, when I was hearing the foundation behind it, I was just shaking my head and smiling, because the role of a researcher, like back to, we've been talking a lot about researchers are executing and feverishly getting their studies done. You and Zarla with your framework, and I loved this. It starts with the first phase is align and starting there. And why I'm smiling is that when I'm working with researchers, the strategic research, it's all about the people. Yep. Can you speak to, obviously there's an amazing framework behind this, but the fact that you and Zarla have focused on alignment first and as most important.
So yes, that was a really deep discussion, because we found ourselves, as two researchers doing this work, we found ourselves regularly being called in to do work, and people are like, so we need you to run 16 interviews. We need you to actually talk to these 16 people. This is how you're going to find them. And I'm like, wow. So what are we consulting on exactly here? This is more like execution. Like, there shouldn't be I think we should replace freelancer and contractor with just executioner, which sounds horrible, but sometimes I think it's actually got a double entendre. But I think that's what we started to react to. We're like, wait a minute. So does everybody in the room even agree on what this discussion is? And somebody will look confused. They don't necessarily have to jump out of their seat. Not everybody is so vocal. You and I both know that. But they will be squirmish, or their faces will go funny. And that is for you to pay attention to. And I always say this is because the exercise we take people through in order to create that alignment, in order to have them distill all the information that's trapped in their brain because they don't have any time again to reflect. So we give them that space to reflect, but we also give them that space to really go, Christine, you went to a meeting and you said you found out something, but I never knew what that was. Can you just tell me? Because maybe that actually already answers my question, or maybe that informs what I think we need to focus on. And by just, I know it sounds crazy, but just telling people you must talk about this now, no proxies allowed, putting certain rules in place, we realized that there was incredible value in terms of having people just talk to one another. I can move a Post-it and nobody will be harmed. No researchers will be harmed in the process. But it's really important to understand. And it almost gives, I will never forget, there was one client we worked with who was the CMO of her company. It's a beautiful company that actually manages public school resourcing. So think of budget, resource, time, all the allocations that have to be made. And I remember at the end of it, she looked at me and she goes, this is therapeutic. This was so therapeutic to get thoughts out of my head, to have a moment to breathe. Because as much as we think we're being pushed up against things, product managers don't have it any easier. Everybody's being pushed up against things. Mm-hmm. So she said that, but then she also said, I think something that really stuck with both of us. She goes, you're giving me a tool on how to talk to people like you. Yeah. Because I don't know how to talk to researchers. I don't know what to tell them. And so they think sometimes that they're helping you by directing you and giving you specificity, when actually you don't want the specificity. You want the clarity, the learning objective.
Meena, you're highlighting something that I hope will be really inspiring for UX researchers at whatever level. You're speaking to the fact, I believe firmly, that UX researchers have the capability to be the most strategic leaders in an organization, because let's think about the skill set that UX researchers have. They can talk to people. They can understand the people. They can ask the probing questions. If UX researchers use their talent and genius to ask the right questions to the people in-house, only good strategic things will happen. How do we as researchers use that zone of genius to do strategic and make strategic differences in an organization?
Now come back to something you asked me earlier about the state of UX and UX research. A lot of times when researchers in today's world are asked, like, okay, so why are we doing it this way? Or what are we doing this for? Or what are our alternatives? I'm sad to tell you, they don't have an answer, because they're not really embedding themselves in the process of what if you have a process, and it's not to say it's templatized, but you have to have a process. You have to understand what steps you're going through and what leniency, or what the ability to not be dogmatic in that moment of that particular step. What sort of space do you have to move around? If you understand that truly, and again, that comes with experience, and it also comes with knowing and having that knowledge and seeing somebody else walk through that and see how they shepherd themselves through the process, I think that is lacking. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's lacking. And then people feel put on the spot, and then the snowball starts. They can't answer the question, so what happens? I don't have the time to wait for this researcher X to answer the question, therefore I will answer the question for them, whatever that answer may be. I have to get myself moving. I have to move myself forward. I can't be waiting for this person to answer me. Yep. And it just starts this, we break it up into, and I think you've heard this probably, we break it up into mechanics and mindset. The mindset starts to take a huge hit because the mechanics are weak. Yep.
Yep.
If you don't have strong mechanics, you don't understand, you're not capable of rationalizing or discussing why, and not feeling that everything is an attack. When did we become such a prickly set of people? If you ask me a question of why didn't you do it this way, you're not challenging my judgment. You're simply asking me why I didn't do it that
I'd
way.
be curious. My hypothesis is part of that prickliness is fear. Fear of not having the same relevant. When I hear a prickly person, I start thinking, what's happened? And why are you feeling this way right now?
I think I would always say this to my kids, even when they met somebody and that person didn't have the same energy as you. So you felt a bit put off. And I'd always say, ultimately, you have to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. You don't know what they're going through. And a woman that we spoke to at a company, she's really respected. And we were like all, woohoo, we're going to talk to her. Woohoo, we're all excited.
Yeah.
And then she really put us in our place. She said, I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't had one good experience with a researcher, not one experience. So you have to understand they come sometimes with baggage because they've had poor experiences and they have had nobody prove otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment, I don't know if it's fear that makes the researcher freeze. Sometimes I think it's simply a lack of confidence. It's a lack of knowledge that might lead to fear. I don't know. Or being put on the spot. Sometimes, depending on what your background is, you might think it's a personal attack. And it just might not be.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think I've had some hard conversations because all I'm doing is asking you a fair question. And then I feel like a complete dingus because I'm just like, I really don't know why I reacted that way.
Yeah, it's so funny. We were talking about you learn a lot over the years. If I talk to myself 15, 20 years ago, there were moments where there was the prickliness. I think over time, what you learn is if you're feeling something internally, like this is something not just for UX researchers, it's for people in growth in general. When you start feeling those feelings and you want to react in a certain way, what I do now is I breathe, as you mentioned, and I question, why am I feeling this way? Instead of 20 years ago reacting.
2 thumbs up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have to ask you that I could go on for hours and I am going to be respectful of your time. I mentioned there was an area you're doing so much amazing work with Twig and Fish right now. Hearing the work you're doing with Boston Public Schools, specifically so many UXers, and it's not just UX researchers. It all starts with identifying a problem in the space. Can you share a bit of your work and what led to the work with Boston Public Schools?
Absolutely. So we have done a lot of work with the city of Boston. The city of Boston has an incredibly advanced innovation lab. They're called the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. They're so amazing. I can't say enough great things about this team because they just have really advanced the way thinking has happened as a city government is concerned, which, as you can imagine, government is complicated. Doesn't matter what level we're talking about. And so we started working with them. Quite honestly, it's very selfless because they're doing work that sometimes doesn't really give you that reward in terms of monetary reward, but it does make a difference community-wise. Like you are impacting your community in a very big way. So whenever Zarla and I get a chance to work with the city of Boston, whatever it is, whether we bid, whether we're invited in, whatever that situation is, we literally will carve out space to work with them because it feels great that we're able to work with them, but we also can contribute to our own city, which we think is quite fabulous. In doing so, one of our clients, Marcy Osberg, had mentioned to me that, oh, you know what, there's somebody I think you should really meet. Her name is Jill Kantrowitz, and I can't tell you enough good things about Marcy and Jill. So I basically got introduced to Jill, and Jill is she's the head of the Boston Day and Evening Academy, which is part of the Boston Public Schools. And so I told Marcy, I really want to start getting more kids involved, like returning people back to that those absences that I was talking about. We're not given the space to be curious. We're not given the space to reflect. We're not given the space to just look at a random garbage can in our town and wonder, why is it designed that way? Nobody asks why just out of sheer curiosity. It might go nowhere. But we should still be asking why. We should be curious. Like, what forced it to be designed this way? And why did it change from the previous design to this? We do need to invite more diversity in. Not just as researchers, there's equally importance of the diversity of the participants and the people that we learn from. So the diversity has to happen on both sides. Not only do we have to hear about a variety of lived experiences, but we also have to have people who are listening to that variety, who can then pull different nuggets of information from it. Not biases, but bringing meaning to something that I might not know about because I simply haven't looked at life that way. And again, this comes back to really leveraging our personal strengths and our personal powers, our superpowers. So I got introduced to Jill, and she was like, you know what? Why don't I bring you in and let's talk about you doing projects with the students in school? And I'm like, 2 thumbs up. I'm in. I worked with Jill Kantrowitz and her wonderful team at BDE. I can't speak enough about the teachers, all the teachers who were involved. And basically what we started to do was we started to introduce the students to this. What does it mean to be a researcher? Now, if you go and tell them, let's talk about research and here's our process, and no, they don't want to sit down. We really have to respect some of these teenagers have been incarcerated before. Some of them have parents who are drug addicts. There's a lot of complication going on here. Their lived reality is very complicated. It makes my life look like a walk in the park. I wanted to make sure that they had a connection to something. And Marcy wasn't there at the time, but she introduced me to another person on her team. His name is Yo Deshpande, really lovely person as well. And Yo said, hey, we're looking at surveillance technology in the city of Boston. It would be great to actually get some information from that demographic. So we basically constructed the study. So theirs is not to worry about the study design and what approach are we taking. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted them to just live the reality of thinking about what it feels to observe. And so we basically did a 2-part study where we did an autoethnography, where they reflected on their own observations and gave themselves space. And then we also said, pick 2 people or 3 people in your personal circle, family and friends recruit. Talk to them about the same topic. We're going to give you some questions, just some feeder questions. If you have more questions, ask more. If you have less, ask less. It's fine. And bring back the data. And I will tell you, I was floored. I was so floored. Not that students ever disappoint because they're always so brilliant, but these students had some perspective that was really important to listen to. So much so that I wanted them to go and present to the city of Boston. But many of them said, we don't feel comfortable in doing that because that identifies us. And the whole thing about surveillance technologies, we don't feel comfortable about that. And I'm like, we all respected it right away. But the fact that they could also produce their output and their reflections in any way, I'm not asking for a PowerPoint presentation, whatever makes sense to you, emote, share your observations. And we got students, they did like poems, they did raps, they did art, pieces of artwork that were very powerful. And at the end of their school year, they have a sort of a showcase. And Jill told me, she goes, they spoke about it with so much pride, and it gave them a sense of purpose. Some of these students didn't even make eye contact with me when I first walked in. This is like the first study. We're doing more, we're continuing to do more. And by the end of it, one girl came up to me and said, you really get paid to do this? I'm like, yes. Could I do this in the medical world for people who have anxiety? I'm thinking to myself, if you want to go and you want to talk about anxiety in your circles, given your background, everybody should listen.
Yeah. Meena, thank you for sharing the work you're doing in this space. Back to a lot of UX researchers are wondering what's next and how do I make a difference in the world. You're bringing to life something you said, that research isn't all about starting with the study plan and figuring things out. You're transforming both. First, you're getting excellent output and outcomes from the study. You're also transforming the lives of some of these students to expose them to new opportunities, new ideas. How will some of these students go off and do something new and interesting? I find it, I guess I'm telling you what I took away from the work you're doing and what I hope UX researchers will. If they take just one or two pieces of wisdom from the type of work you're doing with the city of Boston Public Schools, what do you want them to take away? I'm also hearing a lot of hope.
Absolutely. I would say we have so much hope. In fact, I don't think I ever lost my hope. I sadly was around when the internet formed, and I remember the consternation that people had then. Oh my God, the internet, we're going to lose our jobs. I've heard this before. Sorry to say it that way. Yes, AI is a very powerful thing and people are getting concerned about it, but think of it as another tool. The connection that I can create with you, nothing can create that unless we are talking to each other and we're actively really empathizing. And you actually also see my facial reaction. It's not just the words that I speak. It is the message that I deliver, however I choose to deliver it. It's the total package. So the hope that I have is that we really live our lives as researchers. Like we think about our life as a researcher. You don't turn on your work and turn off your work. You are a researcher and you are a researcher from start to finish. Every day, like so much so that I would challenge myself when my kids would come home. How often do we actually ask close-ended questions to people? Did you have a good day? How was the math homework? Did you do okay in the math homework? It's always a close-ended, like they're forced to answer a question. And I actually caught myself doing that repeatedly. So I started to change it with my kids. Like, how was your day? Tell me about something really wonderful about your day. And it sounds silly, but I started to inculcate these practices into my daily habits. I don't know if you've ever read The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, right? And I literally felt like those were more than enough, right? What is it? Speak impeccably. So choose your words carefully. Don't take things personally. Speak impeccably. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best, which I want to say I do. I always do my best. And if I don't, my conscience doesn't let me sleep at night. So if we take those kinds of things and insert them into our lives and say, this is the superpower I have as a researcher, you have the power to bring people together, not to push them apart. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of the pushing apart right now across the world, that is very saddening. But I believe we have the ability to pull people together. And we see this, right? We see this time and time again as researchers, not only external to the organization, but internal to the organization. When you do something and the team comes together and they've observed or they've heard, and then they walk away and they're joyous and they're excited and they're inspired, how happy people are. Like Zarla and I actually came up with a measurement. We called it our happiness quotient. And we wanted to start measuring companies by their happiness quotient, because that actually is a contributor to happiness. When you feel connected to something, what designer doesn't want to feel like they have made somebody's life better? No designer comes in and says, Christine, I'm going to make your life a living hell. Nobody intends to do that. It might accidentally happen, but nobody starts by saying that. Not a single designer that I know. And I don't believe they exist. So we need to help people feel connected. And nobody can take that away from us. I really think that's what I want people to feel. And don't shy away from your backgrounds. Pull it up. The good, bad, and the ugly. Bring it to the surface.
Thank you for sharing that. The word, as we were speaking this entire conversation, and I want to leave with your message that it is about helping people feel connected. The word connection has been coming up in my mind our whole conversation. So thank you for that. If my listeners who I know will want to find you and find you in Zarla, where is the best place to find you and Twig and Fish?
Just reach out to us. You can email us. I'm Meena at twigandfish.com. Zarla at twigandfish.com. If you go to our website, you can drop us a message there. I'm on LinkedIn. But always feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to make time to talk to people. And if I can help networking or getting people to connect with one another, that's the least I can do.
Thank you. Thank you for inspiring me and inspiring many of us in the UX industry. Thank you.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. My God, I feel like my head has become so much bigger now after talking to you, which is probably not a good thing. Thank you so much.